Welcome to A Mick, A Mook, and A Mike, hosted by Billy O'Connor and Frank Pace.
This week's guests, actor-director, The Morning Show, Lost, and Suddenly Susan, Nestor Carbonell.
My brother Frank. How you doing, pal? How's everything?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, good. You read the obits? Your name ain't there?
How you doing?
I shaved. It's got to be good.
Yeah. I'd just like to update you on some of our guests are doing really well. Stephen Lang has got Avatar is premiering December 18th. James Lejour is co-starring in a new show. FBI, The Rookie, Feds, opposite Niecy Nass. Brett Dos Santos has been up to a director, producer of Mayans. And Mark Blatt has a new Springsteen song.
Get out of here.
Well, Springsteen's got a new album called Only the Strong Survive. And Mark's song, When She Was My Girl, which was formerly Four Tops, Springsteen singing that one. So,
pull that mic over in front of you.
Like that?
Yeah, I'll cut that out. But
So
yeah.
Springsteen's singing a Four Top song, huh?
Yep.
With Mark Blatt. That's pretty
Mark
cool.
Blatt. So we've got our guests
You know,
are doing pretty well.
Springsteen's got a big thing for rock history. You know, he really does. Like he did a great thing with Gary U.S. Bonds when Gary played my joint. He
showed up.
Well, no, I wish he would have shown up. That would have been. I should be so lucky. No, what happened was Gary did my room. Right, I had a bar, maybe it held 350 people, and Gary did my room, and he was great. Put on a great show, and then we broke his balls. He hung out till like 6 a.m. We were drinking. We broke his balls. He broke my balls, etc., etc. Well, about 3 or 4 months after Gary played my room, and he did it for like $700 because that's it was on a Wednesday night. He called me up about 3 years later, and
how many?
3 years. 1, 2, 3. That's the Queen's English, Frank.
He called you 3 years later.
And Springsteen had written a song for him called "This Little Girl Is Mine," and it sprang him back into the top 10. And he was doing oldie shows pretty much, Gary. 2:45 and 7-Day Weekend. Those are the songs he had. And so anyway, he calls me up. Not his agent or nothing. He calls me up and says, Billy, I'm playing the tennis stadium in Flushing Meadows, which I guess is 10,000 people or 12,000. And he says, it's a Thursday night and I'm sold out. He says, how about I play your night, your store on a Wednesday night again? I said, well, Gary, that's great, man. I'd love to have you, but I can't afford to pay you, like what you're getting now. He says, no, I'll do it for the same 700. I said, really? He said, yeah, and I'll park my bus out in front of your joint.
Great.
Gary U.S. Bonds, and he goes, and this way you don't even have to advertise. I said, that's fantastic. He goes, actually, the guy down the block, there was a place that was bigger than mine, Jimmy Burns. It held about maybe 2,000 people, big joint. And he says, he offered me 2,000. But you know what? When I wanted to do the gig before, he wouldn't hire me. So you hired me. He says, I said, well, that's really sweet of you, man. He said, well, I've been in this racket a long time. He goes, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. He goes, and
you're still in business.
yeah, and I'm still in business. So that's cool. So Springsteen's doing that with Blatt. That's cool.
Yeah, he's doing 15 songs. Only the Strong Survive. All of those were old
Motown?
Motown-ish from that era.
Yeah, I was at a Springsteen show one night with Sam Moore was there. He was in a wheelchair. Yeah, from Sam and Dave. He's the only survivor of Sam and Dave. The other guy's dead. Whatever.
I think they're both dead now.
Sam Moore probably is. He was in bad shape then. This is 5 or 6 years ago in Phoenix. He was in a wheelchair, but he brought him up on the stage. And Sam Moore's here. He's really
he's a real historian. So is Stevie Van Zandt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's a rock historian,
without a doubt, and he does a lot for new groups too.
Yep.
And pushes them.
Yep.
So Derek is with us today. He had a rough night last night, I understand. You got to stay in your lane there. I don't know. Drink a lot. You should have stayed with the Boone's Farm or something like that.
Oh, all right.
Signore. I said drinking tequila.
Oh, my God.
Give him a little shove in the morning.
He don't even know what he did.
Somebody's showing their true colors.
So you were drinking tequila, huh?
Yeah, I had a little tequila last night, a little too much.
A little too much, yeah.
Hanging out with some Latino people.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're doing the lemon and the salt and the whole deal?
No, actually, I don't like to do that for some reason.
Really?
It's not my thing, yeah.
Billy, do you ever have any experience with
Tequila?
with tequila
I've had experience with all of them.
and lemons?
Yeah, I tell you, this funny story. Well, I don't know how funny it is, but my buddy Buffalo, this guy was like a behemoth. You know, he's like drinking with an endomorph or whatever, 300 pounds. And I said to him one day, I had the arrogance to say to him one day, you know, man, I don't know what it is with tequila. I could drink this shit all night and not get drunk. I said, well, you know what that is? Because that's the lemons. He goes, the lemons keep you sober. I said, no shit, really? Yeah, that's great. So I kept bagging the tequila. Kept eating the lemons. Of course, 4:30 in the morning, the bartender's shoving me. I'm asleep on the bar. Billy, come on, I got to get out of here. You got to go home. I wake up, there's like 9 lemons blasted all over. I landed in the lemons.
9.
Another myth exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I'll tell you who's not a lemon. Our guest today, Nestor Carbonell, a great friend. He's starring in the morning show now with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. Third season. He was in Lost. He was in Suddenly Susan. So, Derek, can you get Mr. Nestor Carbonell?
You know what, Frank? I'm going to get him on, but I just want to point out something. That segue was the best. The best ever.
You're hilarious with that segue. Bring up my friend Nestor Carbonell, please.
There he is.
There he is. How are you?
I'm great, Frank. How are you guys? How are you, Billy? Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you, Nestor. Indeed, pleasure.
Derek is the third guy in the booth.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Derek. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Third guy in the booth, but actually most important because without him, we wouldn't have you.
Well, there you go. Absolutely.
By the way, could you get any more handsome?
Oh, stop.
Oh,
Wow.
Jesus.
Jesus Christ.
That's a hell of an opening. Do you slow dance?
Yes, I do. I do.
I'm just trying to keep up with Frank there. A real pleasure to meet you, Nestor. Thanks for coming on, man. Really
Thank
good to
you for
have
having
you.
me, Billy. Great to meet you. I loved yours and Frank's book. I devoured it like in 2 nights.
Did you really?
Oh, that's
Or
great.
are you just saying that?
I am just saying that.
What was on page 173?
That was not enough about me. That's the problem.
So you were the one that read it. Huh? You were the one.
No,
Thank
I did.
God.
I loved it. I loved it. I so much of it was so moving, particularly the whole chapter on you being a coach, Frank, to Aaron's team and then subsequently other teams, in the school. That was so moving. So much of it was so moving, but obviously very funny. And it's a page turner. You can't wait to read the next ones. But really, really moving stuff and really poignant stuff about the business too, and about just life, purpose, and all the big themes.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
Take a bow, Frank. You lived it.
Because we don't get a lot of Harvard-educated guys on this show.
A lot of Harvard-educated guys read our books either.
Don't be too impressed with that. You'll find out very quickly.
So where were we?
We're talking about you. We're talking about your beautiful book, your beautiful life, and how moving it, what you wrote was, you and Billy did, and how funny it was, at times, and heartbreaking. I mean, you had me crying, I don't know how many times, but it's, and all the beautiful themes that you talked about, about purpose and about relationships, about friendships, about meaning, the meaning of life. I mean, you asked all the big questions, and you answered them all too, which is great.
Did you hear that, Derek?
If I could just touch the hem of your garment, just the hem.
Did you hear that, Derek?
What's the
And when I say you, Billy too. Okay.
I'm not worried. Just the hem.
I'm flabbergasted. Like this is shocking.
Is this too much praise? I don't know. Have I gone too far?
Don't worry, he doesn't get any here, Nestor. You might as well lay it on.
Well, that contradicts what Kathy Griffin said when she didn't even recognize me at Don Rickles' funeral.
I had a feeling she was going to come up.
Well, we can put her aside. How's the morning show going? Tell us a little bit about it.
It's going well. So we're into the third season right now, and we're about halfway through shooting the third season. And it's a phenomenal experience because we get to, first of all, personally for me, I get to work in town. It actually shoots in LA, even though it's set in New York. But that just on its own is, as you know, as a father, is a godsend, because anything that keeps you home and working at home is just something to be eternally grateful for. So much shoots out of LA now. When I started out, it was everything, you had to come to LA. But now very little shoots here. So I'm grateful just on that alone. And then obviously the subject matter, the material is phenomenal. It's topical. And it's the kind of material that, as an actor, you crave, the kind of things where you hit on subjects that are controversial and that hopefully get people talking. So those are good shows to be a part of for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first two seasons.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, no, we had a lot of fun. I mean, it's tough. It's tough material, but it's ultimately, I think it's rewarding stuff to get to do.
And you play a character named Yanko?
Yanko Flores. Yanko Flores.
Go figure. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Not a Cuban name, but he's Cuban. But hey, yeah, I'm gonna chalk that up to that's his weatherman name. He was probably Carlos or Pablo, or and he's like, that's not gonna cut it in the weatherman world.
And you like working with Reese and Jennifer?
Oh, amazing! And I know you worked with Jennifer a few years back, and amazing. I mean, they set the tone for a really sort of openly creative environment. Really, obviously, they're very sweet, but both incredibly bright. And yeah, I mean, it's a kind of environment as an actor that you crave because it's collaborative. We pitch ideas, we try different things. So no, they're amazing. They're really, really amazing.
Well, again, it's good to hear that, because actors go two ways when they get eminently successful. They get either more secure or they get more insecure. So
that's a good point.
I'm glad to hear that Reese and Jennifer have gotten so secure in their business, because that lets you concentrate on the work.
There's no question, and it's their baby. So it's something that they pulled extraordinary talents in all these different departments to realize this there's a baby of theirs, this creative baby, and they allow those incredibly talented forces to do their thing. And that, to me, that is those are the best leaders, the ones who recognize those around them, what they can do, and instead of micromanaging or putting their hands on everything, they allow them to sort of do their thing and bring whatever they have to the table. And that's kind of the environment we have, which is pretty amazing.
When you say it's their baby, Nestor, they were the impetus for the show. Was they were the creators of the show? Or I mean, they're close friends, aren't they? Close friends.
They're close friends. It's based on a book by Brian Stelter. Am I saying his name correct? I think I am. And it's based on his book. They brought it to Carrie Aaron, the showrunner whom I worked with on Bates Motel. She's brilliant. And then Carrie pitched her version of that world. I don't think it's terribly faithful to the original book, but I think there's certainly elements of it. And then she took that idea, took the book as sort of the genesis, and then she wrote this incredible world. But it was, I believe it was Reese and Jen who brought the project. Who pitched the project based on the book. Carrie hopped along, wrote it, and the rest is history.
Did Jennifer and Reese procure the IP, property?
I believe they did, and I think that's the way. As you know, Frank, right now, I remember. A few years back, I went out to pitch an idea that was not based on intellectual property. It had no book. It had no magazine. It didn't even have a podcast attached to it. So, and then I quickly realized, I had great, lovely meetings, but they were all looking for stuff that's based on something, and it's just sort of the way things are these days, where it has to be rooted in something that's been either published or is out there already in the world.
Is it not just published, Nestor, but is it like successfully published? I mean, is it
true?
I mean, they're looking for bestsellers, right? I mean, they're looking for stuff that's been out there and proven money winners, in other words.
Well, kind of. I don't know, Billy. I mean, sometimes, yes. The obvious ones are the bestseller ones, but then you hear about like people pitching stuff from an article, that's been published, just so it's hard to quantify the success of that article, maybe on the clicks, so it's hard to know. But I mean, that which is kind of crazy. That to me, it's not necessarily a barometer of like how successful this potential show is going to be when there aren't any metrics to gauge it by. Say if it's, like I said, an article or even a post. I've heard people sell stuff off a post, an Instagram post, which is crazy,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are many elements of this business that are sort of driven by meritocracy, and other ones that you scratch your head, you go, I don't know how that sold, or I don't know how that came to be. But I think right now, definitely in the TV world and probably in the film world as well, things are based right now on IP. They're buying pretty much, I remember I went to Paramount. They're like, yeah, we're only looking for IP. I was like, oh, well, okay.
I remember, reading a few articles about Scorsese when he did Wise Guys and Casino and everything. You can read the true stories of those guys, with the names, and it's documented. I mean,
Right.
And then you take something like 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
It could have been written with a crayon. I mean, I read the first chapter of that thing. I said, Jesus Christ, man, this is like Bondage 101. I did most of this shit. And it's not even
His old hat.
And then movie deal and sequels, and I'm saying, Jesus, So I mean, meritocracy.
But that's an extraordinary case. I haven't read that book.
Good for you.
All right, but it's on my list. As soon as we finish here, I'm but that is a proven entity. I mean, that writer sold, I don't know how many copies, self-published, which is a credit to that writer. It's extraordinary. So that is a proven entity. It's when you talk about people selling stuff up a news magazine or an article from a newspaper that you go, how did that come to be? It's just a great idea. It happens to be, out there in, some publication, but it's not necessarily a proven, gold mine per se.
So let's go back to 1996.
Yeah.
Suddenly Susan. We called it Eventually Susan because it was shot 3 times, I think, before we got the cast right. And the cast included you and Judd and Kathy and David Strickland and Brooke, of course. What do you remember about that time? What do you remember about the series? How did you get the series? What was the audition process like?
It's so funny because I'd done another show the year before. This is where I met my wife Shannon, on a show called Muscle for the WB. It was one of the first shows that launched that network in end of '94. And we only did 13 episodes, but it sort of got me into that, the TV world, beyond playing guest star roles. And so when I remember reading for Steve Peterman and Gary Donzig, who are the creators of the 3rd incarnation of the show. I know, Frank, reading from the book, you were on it from the very beginning, right? You were on it for the first 2 incarnations. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only people that didn't get fired were me and Brooke.
There you go. So
And you look alike too. If you look quick,
counterbalance her beauty.
Well, I'm going to leave that one alone. But anyway, I came in after, like you said, on the 3rd incarnation with Gary, and I remember reading for those guys, and this is back then when there was a fixed pilot season. I think now, there was no cable. There was no cable shows at the time. It was 4 networks. It was Fox, CBS, NBC, and ABC. And then the WB had just launched. So, we were, pilot season pretty much started, January after Sundance all the way through, March, end of March?
Yeah, into April.
And even into April, especially with the comedies. And I remember reading for Gary Donzig and Steve Peterman, and it was sort of late in the game. I think this was getting cobbled together at the sort of the last minute. And I read and I brought there's this role of Luis Rivera, and I thought I think this role needs an accent. I think it's sort of, the way that the language is, I think it kind of requires some kind of a Latin accent. And so I went in there and I did a Castilian accent based on this guy a friend of a cousin who had stayed here for 6 months from Spain. And I go, I think I'm going to do that guy. I'm going to bring that guy to this role. And sure enough, I brought that to the audition, and it seemed to go well. And Gary's and Stephen are like, why aren't you doing another pilot? How come you're still around and you haven't done another pilot yet? Because you did well with this role. And I go, well, don't judge me by that. just let me have a crack at this one. And sure enough, I went through the process and then tested for NBC, and then it happened, and then it luckily it worked out. But that was my process. I just read for Steven, and then studio, and then you screen test, as most actors know. You sign your life away for 5 years in a contract, and it's very ominous. And then you go in there and you hope you don't bomb.
Well, if I recall, we did the pilot, and the pilot sold, and then after the show got picked up, then we did the first episode with you in it, if I recall, because Steve and Gary didn't weren't put on the show until after it sold.
Well, I was definitely in the pilot episode, but from what
well, the pilot episode was an entirely different cast.
Completely. It was a whole new pilot. But am I wrong? Was it already? I think it was already picked up for 13.
Yes, I think it was picked up for 13.
So I think we were shooting the pilot, but we were just going right into series at that point.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think it was we redid the pilot, but it was basically just episode 1 of the first 13, and you're right. And you say it in your book. It was extraordinary. We were between Seinfeld and ER, which was the most coveted time slot for any news show, must-see TV at then. And I think the premiere was something crazy. Was it 28 million? Something nuts.
Yeah, it was really crazy.
It was
That's
insane.
amazing when you talk about those numbers, 28 million back then. Now, your character, Luis Rivera, is that right?
Yeah. That was the character, yeah.
Yeah, and you did 4 years on Suddenly Susan.
I did 4 years. I was grateful and lucky to do 4 years on that show. And and that opened my world, for certainly in television. It was extraordinary because that platform, you could have put Snow between Seinfeld and ER and you could have gotten 20 million viewers. It was such a coveted slot.
Thanks.
I'm just saying, hey, but we had 28. We got the extra 8.
It was your looks, Frank. It was your looks that carried the show.
Frank, it was your looks.
What do you recall about working with Brooke?
I love working with her. She was a sweetheart. She was amazing. She, it was such an extraordinary, having grown up with her and all, her stardom and, as a child, and then actress herself, and then me as a kid watching her grow and then to finally see her get this break coming off of that episode on Friends that she did.
Right.
That really sort of, perked everybody's ears, like, oh, wow, she's so good at comedy. I loved her temperament. I loved, how, she just had an easy way about her. Again, very open, and set the stage for this is going to be a fun, comfortable environment, given the pressure we were under. Because, Frank, those days of sitcom, of 4-camera, half hour, and the scrutiny that we had under us was extraordinary. So given that scrutiny, she was amazing, so she set the stage for us as relaxed an environment as you could have.
I'm going to put you on a spot. Can I put you on a spot off the bat?
Please,
go ahead. What's the best gig you ever had? In your own mind. You've done so much work. I was incredible. Actor, director, screenwriter. What was your best gig?
Oh, man, Billy, I've been so lucky. I've been so blessed. I have to say that, first of all, I'm lucky to have had that break with Suddenly Susan, because that opened up my world. But so many, then I got to do a guest star on Lost that turned into a recurring and then a series regular role. That opened up a separate world for me. So that show was another gift, in so many ways, and it opened me up to sort of that world of the Dark Knight. That opened up different doors. And then now with this show, now the morning show, getting to work with these extraordinary talents, this kind of subject matter here in LA. There's so many factors that go into it, and I guess it's whatever you are in your life, as you're pointing out, and you guys were pointing out in the book, is you treasure the certain jobs and the certain that you have that you're fortunate to have, given where you are in your life. Say if you have kids, if you're married, and so every one of those meant something special to me at different points. Suddenly Susan breaking doors and getting me my start. And all of these other ones for different reasons. Lost got us to move our family and relocate to Hawaii for an entire year the last season. So that alone was that was a gift in and of itself. So I pinch myself. I'm lucky. I've had the blessing of getting to work for so many years and lucky to, and now to get to direct And I owe that to Carrie Aaron and Carlton Cuse. They opened that door for me on Bates Motel, another gift of a show. So, it's hard for me to pick one, Billy, but because they all mean something to me in different ways. And even the ones that you don't appreciate the time, you come to appreciate later. You go, there's a reason why that happened. And I think, to me, I always try to be grateful, even if the material is not great or as great as it could be. Always find some level of gratitude for what you have, because it is, as you describe it in the book, it is such a tough business, So whenever you're working, you got to pinch yourself.
Frank often says, and said in the book as well, that the main thing to be successful is to be flexible. I mean, you got to be, look at all different aspects of the business and stay in action. In other words, just stay in action. It's like a gambler. A gambler gets knocked out of action, he's done. You got to stay in action. I got a question for you, totally coming from a layman. How big do you got to be before you start turning down roles? Before you start saying, I don't want to do that. Have you ever turned down a role? Have you ever been in that position?
Yeah, that's a great question, Billy. And, you're lucky when you get into that position where you can say, well, not this one. I'm gonna, and I think a lot of it is, they talk about FU money,
Yeah.
Some of it is, how comfortable are you? How much can you risk not doing a role that you've done before, or you feel like I've done it before and I felt like it was better developed in this other thing. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily grow from this experience, or I don't know that it moves a needle in another way for me. And I think those are the things that you look at. But yeah, I've been lucky enough to have had other opportunities that that you can say, okay, maybe not this one. Again, I'm always grateful for any role that I'm offered. But I think it's case by case. I think there's like there have been times when I'll get an offer and it's like there's not a lot on the page, but there's a moment to be had there that okay, that's an interesting moment. And it's a couple scenes in a film or a show, and I go, there's something interesting about that, and that could be enough. Or the other thing is it's financial consideration. I've got you got bills to pay. Or you just have to stay relevant, like you just pointed out, Billy. You just have to stay in the mix. You just have to stay visible. You just have to keep working. So there's many reasons to work, and then there's a handful of reasons to turn things down, hoping to make yourself available for something that that might be coming around the corner or not. It's a gamble.
My friend Jay Thomas always used to say he never met a job that he didn't like.
Well,
and it's a great quote, and he's right, because he is right. It's such a tough business. You don't know when the next one's coming.
Yeah, I would think, and again, total layman. I mean, if you're looking to work and you're looking to pay bills and you look at a financial situation, you can find something about that script that justifies it. It's like me being in the bar at 4:30 in the morning and running into an ugly woman. I say, but she's got nice ears.
Oh, there's
a great ear there. There's always something you can find.
Oh, you can always find something. There's absolutely and when you get to the point where you don't need to find something, wow, good luck to you. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Billy. There's always something to find there, a reason to work.
Hey, let's get back to Suddenly Susan, because we had a well-known card player in one episode. What was it like working with Donald Trump?
Oh my God, I remember that day. That day was chaotic, because not only we have Donald Trump, we had Mr. T, we had Mayor Willie
Brown.
Willie Brown, yes. It was those three guys, right?
John McEnroe.
And John McEnroe. Well, again, John McEnroe. So it's like you got these mega personalities, mega stars in their own right, and you're going, where do I focus? But I remember asking, I think I sat next to Donald Trump, and I asked him at the time. I think the market was hot. I think NASDAQ was like peaking. The internet was just starting to be a big thing. And he said, it's a bubble. It's a bubble. He goes, get out now. So, and he was right, because it burst not long after that. But I always remember that. I was like, yeah, he told me to get out, and I didn't get out. but that was an extraordinary day. I think Marla Maples was there too. I don't know that she worked on that episode, but I think she was there.
She would be tough to forget, I would think. I was at a crap game, I swear to God, in Atlantic City. And I mean, table was hot. I mean, everybody was press it. Everybody was running. The money was crazy. and she walked by to go to a show and stopped the crap game. I never saw a woman with that kind of beauty that was able to stop a crap game, a hot crap game. Incredible. She had a red dress on, and just was like, whoa, and just she'd be hard to forget, I would think.
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
Trump was there for an entire day. He was there for just one day, wasn't he?
I think he was just there that one day. Yeah. He came in just for that scene. I believe it was that one big scene, and it was extraordinary. It was, but we had, along with Trump, we had enormous guest stars. We had, you pointed out in the book, we had Bob Dole. An episode I had to do a scene with him in an elevator. with Bob Dole, remember that? And that was, and then we had Tony Bennett. We had huge guest stars. That was at a time. Tim Conway came on.
Harvey Korman.
Harvey Korman, who never guested on anything.
Tim and Harvey was maybe the funniest episode that I've ever worked on.
Yeah, it was really great. Those guys are geniuses.
And Rosemary.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Real old school comics there. Great stuff.
Well,
amazing. Betty White. I mean,
Oh, that's right. Betty White was a con woman.
Yeah. And then, come on, Rodney Dangerfield. To me, one of the most epic guest stars we had. Do you remember Rodney at the table read? I remember we had these table reads. And by the way, Tony Sepulveda was our casting director, and he reminded me that after the first season of Suddenly Susan, when we were all under scrutiny with focus groups, this is back then where they focus grouped you in Vegas every week, and you were on the chopping block every week, depending on how you tested after every episode. So it was a crazy year. But he reminded me at the end of the first season, he goes, do you realize that there was a guest star fired off of the table read at just about every episode this season? And I was like, wow. But then because you had to.
And by the way, I'm working with Tony now on Night Court.
Oh my God, I love that guy. Give him my best, man.
I will do that for sure.
Yeah, please do. But I remember he told me that, and there was so much scrutiny, particularly in a half hour, about hitting those jokes right away off the bat. And so you could see people, people who were in the game, they were hip to that. So everybody was like giving full performance at the table. Cut to, I don't know what season it was season 2, but we see Rodney Dangerfield show up at the table read, and he had all these, and he had the script there. I think his girlfriend was there. No, his girlfriend was there. I remember her, Billy. And he had a plate of bagels in front of him. And I just remember, it was his line, and it was like, you flip a page, grab a bagel, take a bite, and then he'd get to the line at some point. It was just, Rodney Dangerfield could get away with that.
I love Rodney.
And I remember that on Tuesday night, he was a little shaky on his lines. On Wednesday night, he was a little shaky on his lines. I kept telling NBC and Warner Brothers, don't worry about it. We're shooting it on Thursday. He'll be fine. Because he was he was in a Thanksgiving episode, and he was an oven repairman.
Yes, he was.
and he died in the oven. He put his head in the oven, and when they went to the kitchen, they said, "Where's the repair guy? He's been in the kitchen for an hour." He was dead.
But he was dead, and no pun, he killed it. He really did. He's so good. He was, he's Rodney Dangerfield.
And he's been threatened to put his head in the oven all his life, right? Tough crowd. Even the hat check girl's name was Dominic. Tough crowd.
And
in no respect.
He did the run through in his bathrobe. and he was famous for not wearing anything under his bathrobe.
He had a lot to be proud of. Huh?
Yeah, well, there you go.
Everybody saw what he ever had. Whatever he had, everybody saw it.
Oh,
it was classic.
He was epic.
Tough restaurant. All they ever served was broken leg of lamb. Tough restaurant. Yeah. The best.
David Strickland.
Oh man,
David?
Oh well, listen, and rightfully so. You talk about Jay Thomas, the funniest man you've ever met. Present company excluded, Billy. But David to me was the funniest guy I ever met. And we, as we became best friends. He was best friends with Brooke, and we were best friends as well. And And we were always doing the B story. It was we always got paired up to do usually
lemon legs.
Lemon legs. Yeah, we styled some lemon legs in one episode. So we the fish fight we had at one episode. I mean, we had so many of those episodes, and just so many laughs. And he was he was extraordinary talent. It was interesting because his character. This is a credit to his talent. His character wasn't particularly well developed off the bat. And given the scrutiny that we were all under with these focus groups, it wasn't till like the end of season 1 where I remember Steve Peterman and Gary Donzik, they were getting pressure because his character wasn't testing as well, I don't believe, to replace him. That started, and they kept telling the network, no, trust us, this guy's extraordinary talent. You'll see it. And they kept pushing the sort of this for him to stay on the show. Lo and behold, I think it was when his parents showed up. Tommy Smothers, is it Tommy Smothers?
Tommy Smothers played his dad. Yeah,
he played his dad, and that episode finally aired. I think in the back half of the 13 or the beginning of the back 9. And David finally had a character that was fully developed. Initially, he was just sort of he played the village idiot, but there wasn't much beyond the one-liners that he was great at to really grab onto. And then they developed his character fully there with his parents. And finally they get a call from the network and they're like, okay, yeah, we really get it now. And after that, it was, he blossomed in that role, and that role just blossomed, and he was so incredibly talented, and like I said, he had everybody laughing on that set, Kathy, all of us, Judd. And it was, he was my best friend those 3 years.
Yeah, it was a tragedy when he passed.
Really tragic.
I think sort of the show died with David. Because
there's no question.
We did a 4th year, but Steve and Gary were gone.
Yeah.
The sets were changed, and it was, the 4th year was not a very good
Too big a hole to try and.
There was no show after that, like you said. There was no coming back after that happened. There really wasn't, and it was a fine effort from everybody. But I mean, it was never going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
For every reason.
Very thin line between genius and insanity. Some people just erase that line, I guess. You don't know the troubles that people have going on.
No.
Were you aware of his problems?
I was very aware of them. In fact, I was, yes, yeah, very much so. And I was very good friends with his mother and his brother, with Karen and with Graham, and all of the troubles. And I would try after tape night, because he suffered from substance abuse, but he also suffered. He wasn't diagnosed as bipolar until much later, I think into the end of season 1. So I want to say right around there. So it was, I remember tape night just going, because you're so charged, you're performing for 400 people, an audience for a number of hours, 4 or 5 hours sometimes. So after every tape night, we would go out and, go get a meal and smoke a cigar. And I just would make sure a lot of the times as I just make sure he goes home and doesn't drink, and just comes down, over the course of a couple hours of having a meal and just, and chatting and whatever, shooting the breeze. So I was very conscious of that, and we were all conscious of it. But he was not medicated for bipolar until later on. And, and it's tough medication, lithium. That's what he, and there's better medications nowadays or, so it was a tough one to be on, and he was on and off it. And, so those are, like you said, Billy, those are brutal struggles, and people don't understand how brutal they are. And, and he was under intense pressure on that show. That show was, there's a lot of pressure on that show, week in, week out to give the goods.
Well, I can tell you, Nestor, people that are diagnosed with bipolar, I was diagnosed unipolar manic depression, matter of fact, and they prescribed me lithium. And I took it for about 3 weeks. And then it turns out that lithium is salt. Your brain is lacking salt, and lithium is salt. But the problem, of course, when you take a lot of salt, it's like saltpeter. And consequently, the plumbing don't work. It's like trying to shoot pool with rope, like it don't work. It's like, and when that happens, like you say, well, screw this medicine. I don't need this shit. I'd rather be manic. And the other thing about being manic is it's fun. Was Strickland
Yes.
like energized on set all the time? Was he?
My God. There were times when I remember his mania kicked in on one rehearsal, and the scene wasn't working, and you know, he was so manic, but he completely fixed the scene in like 10 seconds. Where I looked at him, and I go, "Oh my God, yes, he's right," and he's incredibly manic and incredibly funny. But yes, you're absolutely right. You know, imagine when you're in that state, it's a state of euphoria, hard to come down from, and you don't really want to come down from that. I guess I imagine.
No, you don't. I don't know about the depression end of it. I never really got the depression of it because they diagnosed me as unipolar, which means if I'm going to prison, I'm thinking to myself, oh, you know, good. I get the 3 squares a meal, the 3 squares. I can read. I can get to work out. This is cool, you know. It's prison, you don't see a downside. You walk on the clouds. You don't get clouds.
Right.
You know? So I mean, it's interesting that he had that bipolar thing. I don't know what.
Because it's not just the swing. It's also it's when the mania and the depression are combined. And that's the danger zone.
Yeah.
You know, it's when you're manic and depressed all at once. I think that's when that's when you spiral really badly. You know, and the nerves go. You know, so
I miss him drastically. I mean,
tremendous. Yeah. If you allow me, there is one story that I've never told about and take this for what it is. But I was helping Karen, his mom, and Tiffany Amber Thiessen, who's his girlfriend at the time, move his stuff out of his apartment. Just the last a few possessions of it out of his apartment, you know, from his medicine cabinet, and they were in a banker's box and maybe a couple other boxes. And we left. You know, we were very quiet. We got into Tiffany's SUV. I was in the passenger seat. Tiffany's obviously driving, and Karen was behind me. And I remember the window was cracked open about this much, about 3 or 4 inches. You know, we just, like I said, we just had the last of his belongings. We're about to leave his apartment, and then all of a sudden, Tiffany starts the car, and these, she starts the car, and we're getting going. Now you cut to my wife. Obviously has been hearing about how, you know, I mean, she's been living with me, and you know, and she knows what a state I'm in. Happens to be at Rite Aid, and happens upon a list of like a whole thing of books, and in that shelf of books there was a book by James Van Praagh on how to speak with a dead, you know, and she cracks it open, reads a couple of sentences, and goes, "I'm going to get this for me." She was going to get it for me because she knew what kind of state I was in. So I'm back in the car now. Tiffany's driving, about to pull out of the street, and these 2 little birds, little finches, come in, and they'd start hovering right next to me outside the window. And one of them perches itself on the window, and then the other one's just hovering next to it, just going nuts, just going beep, 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 you know. And I just look at it, and it's such a strange thing. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I took my finger and I touched the crest of the bird that was on the window, and it didn't move. And I just sat there kind of freaked out, didn't do anything. And then then Tiffany started driving, and the bird stayed on the window, and we're just looking at it, and eventually, you know, we turned the corner, the birds fly off. We didn't say anything. We looked at each other. We're like, wow, that was just nuts. But we were very quiet. I come home. Shannon's there. My wife's there. I tell her the story, and her face goes ashen. And she goes, "I got you this book to help you." And when I cracked it open, the first line I read is that one of the ways that the dead communicate with the living is through electricity and birds. Whoa. You know,
wow.
I mean, take that for what it is, but I took that as comfort. And, you know, and I haven't talked to Karen about that or Tiffany, but if and when I do, I'm going to bring that up, because I wonder if they remembered it as I remembered it.
Yeah. Wow.
It's electricity and birds.
You know, Andrea Benderwald is on a morning show, isn't she? Now that you bring up Suddenly Susan, Andrea Benderwald is on Suddenly Susan, isn't she?
On morning show. She was, she played my we're boyfriend and girlfriend on Suddenly Susan, and she plays a makeup artist on the show, and we got to work together again in the first season, and last year as well. And hopefully, I haven't worked with her yet, but hopefully I get to work with her again. It was amazing. You know, you stick around long enough, and you're going to bump into people and work with them again. And thankfully, I got to work with her again. I'm getting to work with her again.
Well,
so
she's one of Jennifer's best friends, isn't she?
She's very good friends with Jennifer, and a great actress, you know, in her own right. Very funny. She was so good as Maddie Piper, on our show. No, she's great. She's tremendous. It's really, really great to reconnect with her.
Do you ever run into anybody from the show?
I haven't run into anyone. Oh, wait a minute. And I'm blanking on his name. The gaffer on Suddenly Susan. He's now the gaffer this season. Blanking on his name right now.
I'm going to blank on his name too.
Okay, all right. When I get back on set, I'm gonna
Any
hit
of
him
the
up
actors?
again. Any of the actors? I haven't seen Brooke because she was in New York in so long. I've communicated with her, but I haven't seen her in a long time. Kathy, I saw on and off for years.
Did she know who you were?
Yeah, she knew.
That's an inside joke for our audience.
Yeah, no, I know the audience knows. I know the famous chapter. Yeah, I went to a bunch of her shows. Shannon and I went to a bunch of her shows, and I think she remembers who. I think she does. But I haven't talked to Kathy in a long time, and I was, I loved her parents too. I know you mentioned her parents. In the book.
She had really nice parents. That's the one thing. The one nice thing I could say about Kathy Griffin, she had really nice parents.
I noticed.
How about Judd? How about Judd?
Judd, I have lost touch with, and I would love to talk to Judd. Have you talked to him?
I ran into Judd about 3 years ago at Art's Deli in the Valley.
No way.
In the Valley, we said we're gonna get together for lunch. We made an appointment to get together for lunch, and then COVID broke out.
Oh man, it's too bad.
So, but I still have an old email address. If you want, I can send it to you.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to get a hold of Judd. Yes, absolutely. That would be awesome. That's a trip, man. That you guys ran into each other.
Yeah, and he did know me. So, Pete, you talk about Peterman and Danzig. We worked together, the three of us, in 2018.
Yes.
And Murphy Brown in New York.
How was that working with those? Obviously Diane English was also involved, right?
It was great. It was great.
And
we got Brooke to do a show.
That's great.
So, we had so many people doing the shows, but it was a terrific experience to reunite after 30 years.
Isn't that amazing?
Some people, we had to redo, even though it was only for 13 episodes. It was a great trip. So after Suddenly Susan went off, how long did it take you? You went through a bit of a down period, or did you hit on something right away?
Well, I remember, as soon as we wrapped there, as we were wrapping the fourth season with new showrunners, I did get an offer from Fox to do The Tick. This is the first incarnation of The Tick, and I remember reading it and saying, this is hysterical. And then I got to my part. This is a role of Bat Manuel. And I go, I know, it's such a great role. It's like, if I'm going to turn this down just on the name alone, I was like, there's no way. But then I was like, oh no, I have to do another accent. I was doing an accent for 4 years on Suddenly Susan. And most casting directors thought I had an accent. And I go, how am I ever going to kick this? If I'm going to do yet another series. But I was like, there's no way. The writing was just so good. I hopped onto that. We only did 9 episodes, 9 or 10. So then after that, it was just back to the folding chairs and back auditioning. And, we talked about, turning down stuff and, Billy and not knowing it, as you guys point out in the book, you don't know when the next one's coming. So it was a series of pilot seasons. You hope to get a pilot. You hope the pilot gets picked up. You hope it goes 5 years, and you can pay for your kids' schools and, but you just don't know. And that is the blessing and the curse of this insane business is the great unknown. So, I did a few pilot seasons. I did a few shows that went 9 episodes. I was grateful for those. But there were some years where you're just like, okay, we just sort of scraped by this year. And then there are other years when you're like, finally I landed on, on Lost, or, I did 13 episodes on Kane for CBS, and that got us through a year and a half. So I did that. And then it wasn't really until Lost that my world sort of opened up in a different way, in the sense that I was able to get seen for more dramatic roles, less comedic stuff, and it also just the subject matter was more in the sci-fi realm. So that opened up that world as well.
Would you be wary when you're in that period, when you're of getting pigeonholed into an Hispanic accent again? Were you very conscious of that when you?
I was, Billy, because I think, it's interesting. You when you bring this up, I'm thinking now also of you, Frank. We reconnected with Connor. Connor is a young man that you basically who considers you as a father figure, very much so. And I just directed him in an episode of New Amsterdam, and he plays an interpreter who does ASL, American Sign Language for a character on the show that's deaf, and he had learned ASL on his own, and he thankfully he had that to narrow himself in the marketplace, for as an actor. He was able to, because there's only so many actors who I'm sure know how to do it and do it well, and that narrowed the market for him, and he's a phenomenal actor. Yeah. And hopefully, when that show, this will be the last season of the show, he'll have enough phenomenal tape as an actor that he'll be able to do a ton of roles that don't involve naturally ASL. And that was the case for me. I sort of narrowed the market knowing that I could do certain kinds of accents. And I'd started doing that as guest spots on sitcom, and that narrowed my market. And then when I got Suddenly Susan, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I had 4 years as a series regular, but now I have an accent. And I'm a little pigeonholed, as you mentioned, Billy. So now I've got to find a way to murder that character and go completely against it. I didn't do that. I went into The Tick. That only did 9 episodes, and at that point, I said, "All right, I've got to murder that role, that particular role, and not do an accent and open up the world for myself in that way."
How'd the 3 Batman movies come about?
So I did 2. I did the Dark Knight Rises. that was a straight up audition. I had done a movie. I'd done this movie called Smokin' Aces a year before. And so that I think that opened up the studio world a little bit. The movie hadn't come out yet, but in that regard, once you get into the studio film world, back then it was sort of a shorter list of actors that many TV actors wouldn't transition to film back then as much as they do now. So I'd just done that film. I'd gotten on Lost. I think that opened up sort of that kind of world as well. So I had this audition, and I had it the night before. I had to go in and read for Chris Nolan and Emma Thomas, his wife and producer on the show, and John Papsadera, the casting director. And I was like, I don't have any time to do this, but you don't have time. Yeah, the night before, I was up late. I worked on it, went in. Chris Nolan was there, and I didn't. He was there with his wife, very nice. I did the material, and sorry, our dog's going nuts. And but it seemed to go okay. But he said very nice, and that was about it. And then I left, and I go, I guess I didn't get the job. This is how it is with actors. It's like you can never read, you can never know by the reactions you get whether or not you get the job unless they literally offer to you on the spot. So cut to, I remember I was on Lost. I was back on Lost. I was back on the island. I had a flip cell phone. This is a few years back now. And I remember getting a text or a call from my manager. I'm on the jungle in between, setups on the scene. And I call him back. He was like, hey, listen, Chris Nolan wants to see tape on you. And I go, what? For what film? And he's like, for Batman. I go, that was like 3 months ago. Really? And I go, yeah, amazing. And then he goes, should I just send him your demo? I go, no, why don't you send him, if you can, I'll get a hold of the director of Smokin' Aces and send him the scenes from that movie I did, Smokin' Aces with him that isn't out, and see if that does anything. And sure enough, Joe Carnahan sent those scenes, and then I got the offer. So that's a long-winded answer. Sorry, but that's how I got
that's cool, the long-winded. And I'm glad you segued to Smokin' Aces, because that was more like an ensemble cast, right? I mean, you worked with a lot of heavyweights in that. I mean, I'm looking at Ryan Reynolds and Ben Affleck and Jason Bateman, Andy Garcia, Alicia Keys. Now, the question I want to ask you is, we had Jack McGee, a good friend of ours, on the show, and he worked with Christian Bale, and he said he's the most intense actor he ever worked with. Did you find that in the Batman things? Did you find him as did he stand out as being more intense?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't have any scenes with Christian. I had scenes, not only. I mean, I had scenes with Gary Oldman. I had scenes where I was in a scene with Heath Ledger on the Dark Knight when I announced I make Gordon the commissioner. So I didn't have anything with Christian. I mean, I was a huge fan of his. I mean, he's a tremendous actor, we all know. And but So I didn't really get to see him in action. I saw him on the plane on the way to, to shoot it. And it was awfully lovely. Not as intense as I thought. He was there with his wife and his daughter. But no, I didn't get that experience with him. I remember Heath Ledger was incredibly intense, and I talked to him a little bit before a scene, and he was very much in his world. He was listening to a lot of music, trying to get into that headspace of that character. But he was once Chris Nolan yelled action, he was as loose as could be. It was extraordinary.
That's one thing that people don't realize is just because you work in a movie with someone or you're in a movie with someone doesn't mean you ever see them. Because
it's really true. Yeah.
It's like being on an aircraft carrier. There's so many people involved, you may or may not run into them.
Yeah.
It's very true. Yeah. It's like that. And like you mentioned, Billy, with Smoking Aces, that was another one where it's extraordinarily huge cast, but we're all different storylines. So I only worked with certain people. I met a lot of them at the premiere. That was a funny thing. It's like, hey, nice to meet you. Nice to work with you. But that was an interesting story getting that job, Smoking Aces, because I remember reading for Joe Carnahan, and I remember him telling me, he goes, yeah, nice job. He goes, now if we mess up your face, I could see how this could work. And it stuck with me, that comment. And I remember I was recurring on a show for Lifetime at the time called Strong Medicine. And I remember going back thinking, he's hung up on my look. I have a feeling he's hung up. I'm not nasty enough looking for that role. And I thought, what could I do? And so I hired the makeup artist on that show, Strong Medicine, to mess me up and take pictures of me like in this sort of nasty room. And then I sent those pictures to him, and I said, I told him basically in an email, I said I couldn't stop thinking about the role, and something about my look or something. And that got me back in the room, and I got me the job, which is
persistence. Way to go.
Must be Harvard.
Yeah, and it is. And I've heard other actors. I know. Hey, you got like a dog with a bone. But I've heard that about other actors who've done different things. But there is something to. It doesn't always work, but to trying different things, to stay relevant, to stay in someone's mind, because there's just so many choices out there.
With the makeup thing, I got to ask you, what's people's obsession with you and eyeliner? Everybody thinks you're wearing eyeliner. What's the deal with that? Every time I read an article, it was about you and eyeliner.
Yeah. I mean, Billy, I don't know if you can see anything on this image here, but, certainly because I don't have any makeup on now, but certainly, as far as you know, no, certainly, even if you look at The Dark Knight, and I'll look at that, whenever it's on, I'll go, oh my God, it does look like I wear an eyeliner. I can't blame people, because under certain lights, and if they put too much foundation under my eyes, it does highlight that I have a lot of hair in my eyes, and so it does make it look like, so I really can't blame people. So I've had that since I was a kid. People they didn't assume I was wearing eyeliner when I was 5, but they did how hairy my eyes were. Now they just assume. But the best comment I had was once I went to Floyd's to get a haircut, and I remember a guy called my name. I go sit in the chair, and he's like, "Hey man, I like your paint." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Hey, your paint." I was like that. Oh, that's paint now. I didn't realize that. It's like that made me feel a little better. He called it paint, so there you go. But no, I don't blame people. I really don't.
Hey, let me ask you. We talk about dips in your career.
Yes.
At a certain dip in your career, you decided or you went into directing. Tell us about how the directing came about.
Sure. The directing was interesting because I didn't really have major aspirations to direct. I've always written. I've always wanted to write and I still continue to write. But it was a function of money. I was doing, Frank, when you and I did Suddenly Susan, we would do 22 episodes, and you were locked in pretty much for that show. And whatever quote you were on, you were doing just fine. Because it's 22 episodes. You as an actor, you get paid a certain quote per episode. So then the model changed with basic cable and premium cable with 10 episodes. But now you're exclusive to that show. But now it's less than half of what you're doing at a certain quote. So I was doing a show that I love, Bates Motel, but unfortunately under my quote at the time, I came in later into that show, And I was flying myself. I had to put myself up in Vancouver, is where we shot the show. Fly myself also on my own dime back and forth, and cover, our family expenses, the schools and everything. And I wasn't making ends meet, and I didn't want to leave the show. I love the show, but so I went to Carlton. I said the third year, I was like, do you think you could help me go to Universal, see if they can help me bump up my quote? And he goes, well, they're not going to give you something for nothing. And so then I said, I don't want something for nothing. I want to work for it. And he goes, well, you ever thought about directing? And I go, to be honest, I haven't. Sorry, my dog is nuts. But he said, if somebody drops out, would you jump in? And sure enough, somebody did drop out that season 3. And then I had to quickly learn how to direct by shadowing our producing director, Tucker Gates, amazing producing director. And thankfully, with the incredible support of the cast and the crew, I was able to make that happen. And that opened up my world. And I'm so grateful to Carlton and Carrie Aaron and Universal, because that's a gift to get to do something like that. Certainly deep into my career as an actor, that doesn't happen often. And that wasn't lost on me. And then I got bitten by the bug. And now I can't do enough of it, in addition to acting, that I go back and forth. I'm so grateful and lucky to get that opportunity. But that's how it came about.
What shows are you directing now?
So I did 3 episodes of Bates Motel. Then I went on to do The Good Doctor. I did a couple of episodes for them. I went on to work for NBC on a show called Rise that Jason Katims had developed. And then I've been directing New Amsterdam. Was I did the last 3 episodes I've done were for them in this last season. The season before, 2 in the last season, and then this last season I just completed 1 in August. And I'm scheduled to direct Law and Order when I wrap here on the season 3 of Morning Show.
Well, that's interesting, because 31 years ago you acted in Law and Order.
I did. It was my first guest spot. It was, and when I spoke with NBC, I said, because I asked, they've been amazing with me, and they said, well, what else would you like to direct for us? And I said, are you kidding me? If the offer would be there to do a Law and Order, it would be full circle for me, because that's where I started. So that would be, so I'm looking forward to that. So they were kind enough to make that happen.
It'll be interesting when you're on the set to see if there's any old gaffers or grips or prop people or
there's got to be at least one.
Absolutely.
You have to believe.
Absolutely.
You have to believe.
Absolutely.
Don Scardino, who we both know, he was a producing director. I think it was on Criminal Intent. I think that's one he worked on for Law and Order for years. And
Don's the producer director on New Amsterdam this year.
It's exactly right, and that's how you and I connected as well.
So you've got 2 kids now?
I have 2 boys, man, and now one's a man, one's 20, which is crazy. And I have a 17-year-old who's still here with us. So it's extraordinary. It's as you know, with Aaron, it's life-changing. It's everything.
Yeah. This 20-year-old in college?
He's in college. He's a music major. He's loving it. He's thriving. He's having a ball. So, but we never get to see him. I don't know how it was with you when Aaron went to college, but it's just like, oh my God, suddenly they're gone. It's like, when are they coming back?
Would you mind telling me where he's going to school?
Yeah, he's the University of Michigan.
Oh, great!
So,
they got a great program there.
They have a great program.
Theater arts and everything.
They do, and he's loving it. He's thriving, and he's composing, and he's in this, getting into the same crazy business I'm in, but an even tougher one, the music one. But he's really talented, and it's not just Dad speaking. I'm hearing this from a lot of people, and he's just got a great attitude. And so I'm hopeful that he sticks with it.
Well, it's interesting because we recently had John Larroquette on.
Oh wow!
And John's son is doing the music for Night Court.
Oh, that's amazing. That's incredible. That's awesome.
And you did a Larroquette show, didn't you, once?
I did. I had the pleasure of working with John, another incredible talent. He's extraordinary. And many years ago, this is before I even did before Suddenly Susan. It was before Suddenly Susan. I believe it was. Yeah.
And in another year and a half, your son's going to graduate from high school, and you and Shannon may consider moving?
Yes. Yeah. How did you notice?
You told me.
Oh, I was going to say. See, good research, Frank. Good research. This is the pre-interview. Oh, that's right. We're thinking, man. We're thinking. Frank. It's. We've been here in LA, and for God, it's 30 years now. Yeah, over 30 years, and it's. And I love LA, but it's changed a lot. And so we're. And thankfully, I'm at a position now where I don't have to be here to audition, and if they're, so we really can be anywhere. We've stayed as long as we have, recently, so that our son could finish high school here. But I think we're looking to move, and we're looking, we're open. So if you guys have good suggestions, we just checked out Charleston. We love Charleston, but we're open. We're open to any and all suggestions.
Great,
Wow.
great.
Charleston. So tell me something about Bandit. I mean, the movie you made with Mel Gibson. That was it released yet, or is it released?
We just released 2 weekends ago, and that was an extraordinary experience. I got that offer. I was actually in Pensacola. I was helping my wife launch her own book, which I will shamelessly plug in 2 seconds.
Good, plug it.
But but we were promoting Shannon's book, and I get this offer, and it was literally like they said, "But you have to fly now to Georgia to shoot this film." I go, please sign me up. So I immediately went from there to Georgia. I hopped on this movie based on a true story of the most prolific bank robber in Canada, and it was with Mel Gibson and Josh Duhamel and Alicia Cuthbert. And for 4 weeks we shot this. The only thing is, 9 days into shooting, I'm chasing. It's sort of a catch me if you can story, and I'm playing the Tom Hanks character chasing Josh Duhamel, this bank robber, through this mall. It's set in the 80s, and I'm wearing dress shoes, and I'm going full pelt, and all of a sudden, I feel like somebody hit me with a bat on the calf, and I go down, and only to find out later in the hospital, an hour later, that my Achilles heel completely is severed. It was completely torn. So I had to quickly decide: do I go into surgery and screw this film, or do I throw a boot on and then and try and give them what I have for 3.5 weeks, and then go into surgery? And there was no choice. I had to do that. I would have messed up that film, and the pain wasn't really that bad. So I put on a boot and finished it, and had the time of my life.
Great.
And the movie was shot in 21 days. Is that right?
It was insane. We shot 200 scenes in 21 days. So I ended up directing a lot of the scenes I'm in, because I was like, there's no way we're going to get this done. So I spoke with production. I said, if you want, I'll do a second unit, get another camera, and we'll shoot these scenes. And so everybody sort of pulled together and made that happen. But that was an extraordinary experience. It was one of those, as you guys describe in the book, one of those experiences that you just don't see coming, and it comes out of left field, and you just go with it. You just go with it all the way through.
What's Shannon's book?
Okay, so it just happens to be here, alongside yours.
Good move.
So her book is called All Is Not Lost, and I think a lot of people who follow you guys will appreciate this, because it is very much about the industry and about her experience specifically. Shannon worked for 20 years as an actress, in TV and film and theater as well, and supported herself. And we, for 20 years, and even into her second pregnancy with Marco, our youngest son, she was fully pregnant while she was working on Seventh Heaven. Once he was born, she's like, I can't leave these kids, and go to a set anymore. I've got to be there for them. And it was a pull that made her want to do that, and then and essentially quit a career that since she was a kid, she wanted to do, and this is all she wanted to do. And she describes this in the book in detail. But the interesting thing about that, and I think what people relate to in the book, is what happens when you're pursuing your dream ardently, and all of a sudden you give up your dream in favor of parenthood. How do you reconcile with your old identity? With that sort of that selfish, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, that selfish drive to fulfill yourself, fulfill that creative drive. When you give that up altruistically or selflessly to raise kids, and yes, that obviously that's fulfilling in and of itself. But what happens to that creative, force in you that you were always feeding? It leaves a cavity when you give up something like that. How do you fill it? And the whole book is about that dilemma, that a lot of people are scared to talk about, because they're going to be branded as ungrateful. It's like, of course you're grateful you have kids, but you can't deny that death inside you. And the whole book is about reconciling with that creative death, and how to keep that alive in a sense.
It's fascinating. Where can you get?
You can get it in all bookstores. It's certainly on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it's a beautiful read. It's funny. It's very funny too. So it's not a heavy read. She bears it all, and I don't mean it in the sense of it's not a tell-all about other actors. It takes place in the last year that I shot Lost. So when we moved to Hawaii, this is when she started journaling, and this is when she was at her lowest, and she started journaling. So hence the title, All Is Not Lost. But it's funny. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble, and it's a very fast read. It's I'm really proud of her.
It's interesting because my wife went through the same thing when.
Oh, is that right?
When we had Aaron, she just devoted herself to Aaron completely, and she gave up work. And fortunately, I was could make a comfortable living.
Right.
But I realized, and maybe she realized also, that we were doing so many things. I was so busy with my career that, a lot of times I couldn't be there for Erin when she was growing up. I tried to. That's why I coach soccer, so I could steal 2 hours with her a day before she went to college. But then when Erin had her first child and then her second child, all that other horse shit went away because I could just focus on the two grandkids. And I've got so much love for those two.
Yes.
Because I can now focus on them instead of focusing on achieving stuff in my career. And that's so great.
It's a beautiful thing. And how did your wife, was she able to reconcile on her own over time, or Frank, because I know it's a tough, it's interesting because you and I, obviously we stayed in this business and there's a level of fulfillment, there's ups and downs, but your mind and you're creatively constantly filling it or not, but you're striving to fill it. So we have that distraction. Whereas when you give that up, that other life force, you have to fill it somehow. And it's a tough one, and certainly kids help, and grandkids, I can only imagine even more so, because you're so devoted to them.
Well, we hadn't talked about this, but Billy and Derek know this. When Erin got married, she wanted to get married on the Warner Brothers lot.
Yes.
She said, "I grew up here.
Yeah.
I want to get married on this lot." So that was very meaningful to me.
But beautiful.
I think Karen fulfilled herself in other ways because she was always involved in everything Erin did.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. And by the way, that it's got to be one of my favorite chapters in your book, and both your guys' book is the one about you coaching soccer. It's such a moving chapter, and it also speaks to exactly what we're talking about. This theme of, you're busy, you're achieving things in your career, you achieve so much in your enormous career, Frank, but you're getting pulled, you're getting tugged emotionally, because one of the most meaningful things, if not the most meaningful things, is in your life is being a good father to Erin, and that devotion you had to that team that started with Erin, but then grew to the entire team and players far beyond when Erin graduated, was extraordinary, and is extraordinary, and that speaks to, and even to me, an even greater purpose, which is what your book hits on so well, is we're all looking for meaning. We're all looking for purpose in different ways, and that one just struck such a deep chord in me. I love that chapter.
Thank you. Derek, do you have any other questions for Nestor? I think we've taken enough of his time.
Oh, have we? Okay, so then I have no questions.
No. That's not what I meant.
Put a sock in it, Derek.
Stop talking so much. Yes, I do have a couple questions. How you doing? So,
hey, Derek.
So you're a smart guy. Obviously, you went to Harvard.
Don't let that impress you, Derek. Don't let it fool you.
What's something that you know that other people don't know
about me?
Not about you. That's my next question, actually. So you are smart. Wow, look at
that. That they don't know. God, that's so revealing. I don't know. I don't know that people. I mean, that people don't know. Oh my God. Just in general, that people don't know. Well, that is the biggest question. I'll have to think on that.
Okay.
Let me go like an actor would go and tell you about what they don't know about me.
Okay, perfect.
I think I was very lucky. I was extremely lucky to be born to parents, and not everyone is as blessed as I have been, and my brother and sister have been, to born with parents who ostensibly had it all when they grew up in Cuba, lost it all during the Cuban Revolution, and started from scratch. They met, in New York, and I got to tell you something. Those stories, I was very lucky because I never saw a day of poverty in my life, and I was exposed to and got to go to great schools throughout my entire life. We moved a lot because my father worked for Pepsi-Cola International. But the most important things that I think stuck with me are the stories of their struggle and how they had nothing. They came here with what they had in their pockets to raise this family and work hard against all obstacles, language barriers, etc., everything, to provide for us and give us this education. But more than that, a stable family, even as we're moving, from country to country or house to house every 6 months or every year, or sometimes every, 3 or 4 years. So that's something that, some people might not know about me is how blessed I was with the parents I have.
Right. Wow. That's great. Have you guys been back to Cuba at all, or have you been back to Cuba?
I've never been. I've
Wow.
never been. My parents haven't been since 1960, and unfortunately, it'd be very dangerous for me to go. My father still, actively exposes the horrors of the Castro regime. He writes about it. Still to this day is writing about it.
Wow.
So we had the same name. My family was very political against both Batista, the previous dictator before Castro, as well as Castro, and trying to reestablish democracy and reinstate the democratic constitution, the 1940 Cuban constitution that's sort of based and modeled off of the U.S. Constitution. So I've never been, and I won't go until there's change, but I've certainly heard a lot about it.
Well, was it your granddad that wrote the book, The Sovietization of Cuba? He was.
That was my father.
Your father wrote the book.
Yeah, my father wrote. Yeah, and the Russian state. 30 years of Sovietization in Cuba. He wrote that book. In the, I want to say in the 90s. Yeah, mid 90s.
The island fascinates me. Number one, it's 90 miles from Key West, and it just fascinates me. If we look back at the 50s, and I'm a bit of a political junkie. When Eisenhower was president, but the Dulles brothers, Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, they had their hands so into Cuba. I think they had bought up thousands of acres, millions of acres, right, a nickel an acre. And then, so when they went, and we drove them in that direction. We said no cigars, no sugar. We're not buying any of your sugar. So they had to sell it somewhere. So we almost pushed them into the Soviets. It was just insanity.
Well, it's interesting. What a lot of people don't know about the revolution is actually it was an intellectual revolution. So the economy was actually not in bad shape. In the middle class was actually like the second or third strongest middle class in all of Latin America at the time. And these are numbers you can get in the UN reports. So these are literacy rate was actually quite high. Medicare was the medical care was good, but there was massive corruption. There's a lot of corruption. Here's one of my sons coming through. He almost went through. But where I think a lot of people, where there's a lot of confusion, is that people assume that the revolution was started because of massive poverty, the huge disparity between the rich and the poor. It wasn't a Soviet revolution in that sense. It wasn't a Bolshevik revolution. It was an intellectual revolution because people were tired of dictators, one after another. There've been a string of them over the years. And Batista had been previously elected, and then he stepped down, and then and then he ran again, didn't win, and then he was in charge of the army, and he staged a coup, and he came into power again as a dictator. And suddenly, the country had been experiencing democracy. Suddenly now they're going backwards with another dictator, and very corrupt. But like I said, there was a strong middle class, but where it started, that revolution, was in the colleges. It was an intellectual revolution. It was a student-led revolution. So when you saw people in jail, like alongside my uncles who were imprisoned by Castro, and tortured for 17 years for rejecting political indoctrination. They were there with people from all walks of life, from farmers and peasants, black, white, mixed, so it was a whole cross section of the population. It wasn't rich and poor. It was very much of people getting together and saying, we're done with the dictatorships.
Fascinating stuff.
Fascinating stuff. Billy, any closing thoughts?
No, Nestor, but I really, really appreciate you coming on, man. You're a delight to talk to. Just a delight. I mean, real pleasure.
Thank you so much. I thank you both so much. This has been amazing for me. And again, I love your book, both of your guys' book. I love what you have to say about not just this business, but about humanity. And, I hope more books are written like that. And I hope you have another one in you because I look forward to reading it.
Well, I'll send you our second one and our third one.
Oh, no, I'll buy them. Are they on Amazon? I was not aware. I didn't know there was a second and third.
Yeah, the second one is called, well, you know what I'll do? Let's have lunch sometime and I'll bring you the second and the third.
Lamar's Gamble and Combustible.
I hope you join us, Billy, and maybe we can get Judd to come too.
That'll be great.
It sounds terrific.
That would be great. But let's get together for lunch really soon.
I love that. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Billy. Thank you,
really
Derek.
Pleasure meeting you, brother.
Really. And give Shannon my love.
I will, and Karen and Aaron, of course.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Be good, guys. Thank you.
So, buy Shannon's book for sure.
Buy Shannon's book for sure.
Make sure you see Bandit. And, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a great
and
film.
watch the morning show.
And watch the morning show, yeah, by all means. I mean, and watch Nestor's career flourish, hopefully. Continue to flourish.
Continue to flourish. He's a great guy.
Yeah, terrific guy.
He balanced off Kathy Griffin. It was a great.
Yeah, he's very, very interesting guy.
Great guest.
Yeah.
I think that should just about do it for us.
It will.
Anything else you want to add, Derek?
I don't think so. I think that's it. I'm sorry, I wasn't on camera.
Can we hear you?
Yeah, no, right?
Yeah.
I think that's it.
All right.
I would like to add one thing. He's very. I can see why he is a working actor, like a star of an actor. He's very comfortable to talk to. He's very likable.
Yeah, very likable.
Would you guys agree with that? He's
Yep.
extremely
Definitely.
likable.
Yep.
Kind of guy you want to drink tequila with. You know what I mean?
Yep.
In moderation.
In moderation, and wake up without any limes on your head or lemons on your head.
Yeah.
All right. See you next week,
Well,
folks.
thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And thanks very much.
Next week's guest has appeared in more than 100 TV series and movies. Jack McGee.
We'll see you next week.